Hey, Saturday Night at the Atheist. Oh no, shit! I didn't want to put that up there. Let me get rid of that. We were going to do a thing on Maddox tonight, but we all decided we found out he's irrelevant. So
yeah, I didn't see any reason to do it.
Yeah, he's just completely irrelevant. Anyway,
so here we are. Maybe we'll find some relevance if we all have some mushrooms later.
Speed, this is weird. The timer just started for me. Right after you started talking.
What timer?
On StreamYard there's a timer that says live and then how long it's been going. And it didn't start until the title ended.
Well, mine says 1:35.
Huh. That's weird.
No, it started
must have been
before the
lagging
title.
for me.
I see it. I see it. I see it.
You'd be lagging, Mr. Andrew.
It's lag boy.
He's lagging.
Inscrutable destiny.
What's going on, Mr.
Destiny boy?
The fuck's going on?
Inscrutable destiny. I don't know. We're conjuring up demons and.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's Saturday Night at the Atheist. That's what we do. Conjure up demons.
Who brought the goat's blood?
Baby goat blood?
I don't know. I mean, I was just told to bring goat's blood.
Oh, okay. God damn it. Scott, you were supposed to say baby goat blood. God damn it.
Fuck.
Oh, man. Well, they're
bad. I didn't kill the mom goat either. Shit.
They're also cute.
I know.
What about ram's blood?
Lamb's blood, yeah.
No, ram. Ram.
Ram's blood. Oh, okay.
I have trouble with my pronunciation. Forgive me.
Ram. It's only 3 letters. How can you
fuck that up?
How can you fuck that up that bad?
Okay.
Well, probably because I have retainers on and it screws with my speech still.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So, how about those fungus?
What about the fungus?
Gotta love them.
Yep, gotta love them. There's a fantastic fungus documentary on Netflix that just came out. That was actually pretty cool until about the middle. They sort of go off a little bit on the woo track.
Yeah.
And then they sort of start trying to sell eating mushrooms. And
I'm guessing everyone in the room already knows that fungi are more closely related to animals than they are to plants.
They said that in the Fantastic Fungus documentary.
They did.
Good.
In the very beginning, yes. They made it.
Better have gotten that right.
Yeah.
So, those of you who are aware of Terrence McKenna and his son, I can't remember his son's first name.
Yeah.
How, on a spectrum of credible, are they as people of science?
In my personal opinion, or what other people might say?
I don't know who this individual
but
is.
whatever you know of what other people say is fine too.
People have talked about him, and they've considered what he's had to say. I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give him somewhere around a -5, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
This might be a dumb question, but who are you guys talking about?
Terrence McKenna.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Who?
Go ahead.
You've heard of the stoned ape theory, Andrew?
No.
It's the idea that hominids became intelligent because they were eating magic mushrooms.
What?
Yeah, well, it's pretty.
Really? That's
Andrew, my sentiments exactly.
The more you know.
That's McKenna.
Wow. All right then. Fucking hell.
Yeah. Yep.
Gutsick Gibbon has already weighed in on that topic with a heavy, nah, probably not.
Well, They said it was a little more complicated and they had some case for it, but I don't understand what that case would be. It almost sounds Lamarckian, you know?
Well, part of the case is that when you somehow or another, when you take psilocybin or whatever, it starts remapping neural networks or growing your neural networks. Therefore, when an ancient hominid ate mushrooms growing from poop, then they got high and their brains started to grow over time.
And turn into poop.
That's how I interpreted it.
I think the real reason for it is that you need decorations in hipster coffee shops. And so he decided he was going to write the book.
There you go. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah, Kafai loves Terence McKenna. So if Kafai stops in, we're in trouble. It's his favorite thing.
Well, I know he would advise us to take heroic doses of mushroom and psilocybin and all that. Anybody else have an opinion about the guy?
Ooh, fungi reproduction.
Yeah. Anybody that says do something heroic, that automatically means do something really fucking bad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of like tying a bungee cord around my chest and jumping off a cliff or a bridge when somebody says heroic.
Oh,
Yeah.
Don't do that, Scott. You're gonna make me sad.
Oh God, you are such a wussy, Scott. Time around your testicles and jump off the bridge.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
That's heroic.
Actually, the way I'm picturing that sounds better. Actually,
or really stupid. One or the other.
Yeah.
Bob Sadler, I did not say I was the most heroic.
Who just popped in? I can't. Oh, wait, what? Oh,
You're seeing, God, Andrew, are you?
I'm
sure? Are you sure you haven't taken?
You're looking at the YouTube rather than the StreamYard.
No, just because someone moved around and I was like, oh, did someone pop in? And then I was like, I don't know. Stop it.
Okay. So I've been trying to find details of fungal cells. Like, particularly, I would like to know what kind of cells go into this goddamn cap. So there's Amanita muscaria. That's the scary. Don't eat that mushroom. Bad mushroom. You find flies dead around this thing all the time, like flies laying dead around it. That's always a good sign. You shouldn't eat it. Anyway, it's beautiful. They come in orange, yellow. In northern Minnesota, they grow in orange, and there's remnants of the cap. But this, I think this mushroom has been responsible for the death of more than one czar in Russia, as I remember. I don't know if that, I haven't fact checked that story since I was a teenager, but that's what I'd heard. But it's a pretty mushroom. But I would like to know a little more about cell structure. And it turns out there's a lot of things we don't know yet.
Yeah.
About fungus cell structure or just cell structure in general?
Well, just all the different kinds of cells we have. It's really like I was trying to find a liver cell, hepatic cell structure, and there isn't even a hell of a lot written on that. There's a lot written on the liver and all the different cell types, but the main cell type of the liver, I couldn't find any really good diagrams and information about how the cell is organized, because I become interested in the diversity of cells as opposed to the diversity of animals, or along with the diversity of animals. Anyway,
I'm sure you can find some plates and pictures between the pages of a $350 medical textbooks about the liver or something.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, here's a random snippet from my life in high school. When we were doing a project on models of either animal or plant cells in AP Bio last year. Guess what kind of cell I decided to do?
Liver cell?
No.
What? Brain cell?
No.
Sperm?
No.
I'm out of guesses.
I did a fungal cell.
Oh, do tell us about fungal cells.
So did you find any really good diagrams of the inner workings of the fungal cell, the cytoskeleton, and what's...
Not that kind of detailed, but I did find some stuff about how trying to remember how some fungal cells have what are called septa, and they kind of divide the cells as they grow, whereas others there aren't any septa, so you can kind of think of it as one big cell with a bunch of nuclei in it.
Syncytial.
So there are different kinds of fungal cells. Yeah,
that's called a syncytial, if I'm pronouncing it right, membrane.
Something like that. Yeah,
multinucleated. That's actually very common in early embryos. They have a lot of like humans have a syncytial phase, and yep, it's pretty cool. So, what kind of cells did you say? What?
Septa?
These kind of infoldings of the cell membrane, I guess, called septa. Win S. And let's see, they also have this. I can't remember the name because it was something sounded German or something, but basically it was this little tip at the end of the hyphae, this long string of fungal cells where basically you have all these proteins and organelles that kind of contribute to adding more cells at the end of the strand so it can grow. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, here we have something.
I use that diagram right there to the middle one.
Fungal hypha cells, or
Yep.
Okay. So hypha consists of one or more cells surrounded by a tubular cell wall. In most fungi, do you say fungi or fungi?
I say fungi.
Then I'll say fungi. Okay. Well, people do it both ways. Anyway. Oh, look at this. Hypha growing on tomato sauce. I got to tell you a story. So I went to Columbus for 2 months, and I took some old spaghetti out of the fridge before I went and put it on the counter. And my two sons and my son's girlfriend lived here. And I came back 8 weeks later. It was a science experiment. And my experiment was not about fungi. It was about seeing whether or not they would actually throw the tomato sauce away. They did not. And it looked just like that. Well, no, it was a lot bushier, and it was growing over the sides of the pan. So, anyway. Yep.
Okay.
Want to have fun?
They just thought you were trying to get high from it.
Yeah. Yeah, they thought it was one of my science experiments, so they didn't want to disturb it,
Yes, Icarus, the Spitz and Corporate.
That was when I came back, and the cat box was in horrible shape. But then after that, after I chastised them thoroughly for days and days, they went out and bought 25 cat boxes, and so they would just throw the old cat box away instead of cleaning the cat box. I love my kids; they're just so brilliant. Pretty cool. Okay, because this septa, singular septum. So septa divides the cells, and it looks like ribosomes, mitochondria, and even nuclei can flow between the cells. Mineral structure. Yep. That is bizarre. Polymer and fungal cells.
Fungal cells are quite bizarre, and their reproduction is even more bizarre.
Yeah, and then chitin is, or chitin, or however you pronounce that. Also in arthropods, like crab and things like that. So there's an interesting connection. And then it's about hypha, long branching filament. That's what you were talking about, Scott. The big branchy thing that's underneath the ground.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually the interesting thing. The thing we see as the mushroom is actually just the fruiting body. The main part of the organism is just underground as these hyphae.
Yeah, like ninja.
Yeah,
ninja mushrooms. Yeah, you never see them.
And apparently, if one tree has too much of one nutrient, it will share with other trees that don't have, that nutrient. So apparently, forests are communist.
Yeah, there's a lady that discovered that, and she had a lot of pushback, of course, when she first published. But I think it was out in like Seattle, and they found out that they were doing this. They would clear cut a forest, and then they would plant one species of tree, and they found out that there needed to be two different species in order because of something to do with these mycelium communicating with each other about bugs, and they were working together basically, two different species through the mycelium through this
So that's
wild
pretty
man.
interesting.
Huh.
And they also put out, like, if one got attacked by bugs, they would actually send signals along the mycelium, the fungus, from their roots to alert other plants of the bug attack. So they were communicating in that way. And she managed to prove quite a bit of that. So they're kind of going nuts with that right now, trying to figure out all the different interconnections there are.
Huh.
But they got here first, on the land first, right?
What?
That's my understanding. They found evidence of fungus going back 2 billion years.
Well, we can never be sure that they're actually fungus, so maybe.
Oh, that's
I
true.
don't know. I haven't read the papers you're talking about, but I mean, maybe they go back that far.
What do
Well,
they call
also-
fungus?
What?
Or fossils, where they call it low something evidence. What do they call it? Low quality, low fidelity. What the Christians, the creationists, what do they call it? They have a name for it. Standing for truth, always saying it.
I really don't care about made-up Christian names for things.
Okay. Anyway.
Predictions are the gold standard in science, which
Also,
is actually true, but
there was a fossil imprint of from this fantastic fungus documentary on Netflix. There was like fossil evidence of a mushroom that went back several 100 million years as well.
oh,
I don't want to say it was 500.
Yes.
Maybe it was
Yes.
1,000. I don't know. But there was a
Yeah,
nice
it was
fossil imprint of a mushroom.
They found one, I think, 700 million years old. I thought, was it 700? No, it was 500 million years old.
Yeah, something like that. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. So yes,
hold on,
it was
guys. I'm pulling up a picture.
Z. Spitzenkorper. Z. Spitzenkorper.
Oh,
Yep, that was very important. Those were, I think they had something to do with Hitler, as most German things did.
really? Speed.
I'm just
Pointed
joking.
body.
Bad
a-
joke.
Structure found in fungal hyphae. That is the organizing center for the hyphal growth and
Ooh, speaking of
morphogenesis.
Cool.
Speed. Can I share my screen real quick, and then
Yeah.
we can go back to this? Because you
can.
mentioned the first plants on land, and I want to show a picture of one of the fossil plants that is one of the earliest known vascular plants that we know of in the fossil record.
Is that big
one of
tall
them,
one?
at least. Nope. It's
So
only a few inches, I think. Cooksonia from
Ooh.
420 million years ago or so,
Wow.
I believe. Someone check me on that. Anyways,
What did they
this is
eat?
what some of the earliest plants look like.
Wow. Not very plant-like looking.
So
It's
what
like
did
a
they
bare
eat?
bones design for a plant.
What was their metabolism?
They photosynthesized.
Okay. Wow.
They were plants.
Cooksonia. Oh, they were plants. Okay. They weren't fungus.
Right. I don't know if they had leaves, actually. I looked something once where it said that they may have hypothetically photosynthesized through their tissues, like the branches you see, but I don't know if anyone really knows. That'd be interesting, though. But I don't think they have true leaves like ferns, for example. They're kind of further back on the plant tree.
Raccoons are writing, these vesicles travel to the cell membrane via the cytoskeleton and release their contents, including ceratoplanins and hydrophobins, outside the cell by a process of exocytosis, where it can be transported to where it is needed. So I'm guessing those are things that dissolve minerals and Vesicle membranes contribute to the growth of cell membrane while their content form a new cell wall. Yeah, this is the stuff I wanted, like more details. Anyway, but I want to see some electron micrographs of fungal cells. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go
Well, I
right
hope
in.
this helped at least a little bit, Speed.
What?
What I shared with this.
Yes. So always helpful. Oh.
Why? Because I didn't know if you had ever looked at this particular website or this article. I meant.
No, I hadn't.
Oh, okay. Yay.
Yeah, I just linked to it from something else. So I was looking at, anyway, cool. No, I linked to it from looking up your SEPTA. Yes, thanks. Oh. Okay, we got some pictures here. So here's fine structure of torula yeast cell, but that's more single cellular, right?
Yeah, some fungi are multicellular, some are unicellular.
Yeah. But I got pictures. Okay, good enough. I'm good. We can carry on with demon killing now and other interesting Christian things.
All right then.
Fair
Christian
enough.
bullshit. So what do you?
I had to step away for a second. Did you guys talk about bioluminescence in fungi?
No, we haven't.
No,
we didn't.
Yeah,
I got a story. So when we were like, I don't know, 16, 17 years old, I went camping with my redneck friends. And I was the sciencey guy in the crowd. They always come to me for sciencey questions. And this Paul Walters comes running back to the campsite and he says, I saw a ghost. And he led us out there. And it was a glowing tree stump, glowing like green, like fluorescent green, bioluminescent fungi. So, yeah. Yes.
I read a paper about bioluminescence in fungi, but it was a while ago, and all that I really remember about it was that it kept popping in and out of the closely related populations. So one group would have it and then it would go out, and then another group would get it and it would go out. But that's really all I remember from the paper, to be honest with you. But I still think it's a really cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they're spooky when you do see them on them. If it's just pitch black out in the woods and you're walking along, they do look like ghosts. Just this glowing patch of like a stump sitting there, and you look at it and it's like, why the fuck is that glowing? What's happening? Anyway, so I popped his bubble. I told him what it was because I knew I'd read about it. Excuse me.
Yep.
That's a good thing. He never would. His bladder would have burst because he never would have went to the bathroom again. He never would have left.
The more you know, the better you live.
You know. Anyway,
Andrew, when you debate a lot of the creationists on YouTube, you usually stick to the science stuff. But have you looked at any of the other kinds of apologetics that they talk about? Like presuppositionalism and the moral argument and the stuff that Mr. Batman was arguing last night about the uniformity of nature and science and stuff like that.
Not very much until last night, at least, and then I started looking into the presup only a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, it turns out Praise is going to do something in 30 minutes on properly basic beliefs and why they're impossible, without, or rather, justified true beliefs and why they're impossible without God.
Yeah.
We should all go there.
I don't know. Philosophy just isn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe not. At the same time, I would say that even though a lot of the stuff that you'll read in philosophy, in my opinion anyway, can be really shitty, philosophy still helps you to think very critically in a way that I don't think you'll get anywhere else, including if you dive deep into the sciences. It allows you to see things from different overall perspectives. and it's helpful both in like understanding people and in being able to assess things from various different viewpoints when you have to.
Yeah, I could see that viewpoint. Personally, I'm more of a practicalist, so what I can apply to reality, I don't tend to think much about. That's kind of just the way I think about things. But yeah, I can definitely see how philosophy can be important in that way.
Oh, we did it earlier. Okay.
Oh, most of what they come up with is pretty much bullshit because of where they start from and how they approach the world. So a lot of it is fluff, but there's some good stuff like biosemiotics came from semiotics, and there's linguistics, and I guess.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing I had a question about, Speed. Or actually, Nephis or Nephilim Free has said this a lot, that like linguistics disproves naturalism because language is non-material. Like, do you know what's up with that?
That's what I mean by really bad philosophy. When
I would ask him, like, for a citation of who claimed that language is natural or like material.
That's true.
Immaterial.
When he's given that argument, he used to come to these pal talk rooms and debate. And so in past conversations, when he said that, it really tied into his whole argument about information.
Right.
His arguments haven't really changed in the past, 12 years that he's been on this community or whatever it is, whatever it's been.
So simpler varieties of humans have a great deal of understanding abstractions, and they come up with ideas like abstract objects, and they want to talk about them like they're other objects, like normal objects. And primates get really confused about this. It really kind of drives me crazy. It really isn't that confusing, is it? How fungi help plants?
Is that PBS Eons, Chris?
What's that?
Oh, I was asking Chris, the video we posted, is that PBS Eons?
Oh, okay. I posted a video.
I have a feeling it is, but I want to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they're copyright strikers, aren't they? No, it's Wonder Why. Like Holiday.
Oh, well.
Oh, God, I got a cat, I got raccoons, I got trouble, so I'm going to have to mute for a while. You guys are on your own.
All right.
Okay.
Very well. Hello to Jason Torn in the side chat.
Jason.
Well, Jason, come on in, man.
Should I throw out a random topic then, or?
Sure, why not?
Randomize that topic.
What's up,
Gers? Gers here.
All right, there's the link, ladies and gentlemen. It'd be nice if Mom or Maya would come in too, set us straight. We're gonna bust this stream at the seams.
Where's that topic, Andrew?
Yeah, give me a topic.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bore you.
Oh no, I want to hear what you want to say. So I was asking some astrophysicists recently about the relative merits and drawbacks of inflationary models of cosmology, and how inflation is the dominant model in cosmology currently, but how there are alternative models and how much they kind of stack up. And it was kind of interesting to me how kind of all the models, at least currently, have, or at least in this case, I'm just going to stick with inflation and cyclical models. Both don't have any direct observational support. They have observations consistent with them, but there's no clear differentiating observation currently. And does anyone maybe have any thoughts on that, I guess?
When you say that there's no empirical support for inflation, I mean, like, I know that that's said a lot of the time in popular literature, but I have I've got a particular book that I still have to go through, which the title of it is called Observational Tests of Cosmological Inflation. and all of the different authors contribute to it, basically testing various aspects of the theory to make sure that it works. And the book is put forward like as a success, as something that legitimately lends support to inflationary theory. So, I mean, like, I'm not an expert on the observational support overall for inflationary theory, but I know that there's stuff out there that claims that there are such things.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any current like observational like support for cyclic models.
Well, here's a quick question. When you're talking about whether or not there's proof for expansion, I thought things like the redshift and the cosmic background radiation were evidence for that. Am I mistaken?
Those are generally pillars of evidence for Big Bang cosmology in general, not necessarily inflation.
So, but at the same time, you have those 4 standard problems of Big Bang cosmology: the horizon problem, the flatness problem, and so on. And the predictions of evolution of inflationary theory solve those issues. So, I mean, I think that should count. I mean, at the same time, somebody might turn around and say that that's ad hoc. But like I said, I mean, there is that book that I just referenced. If you're interested, I'll find it for you, Andrew, and maybe we can go through it a little bit to see what kind of evidence that they're offering.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with the fact that there are observations that inflation can explain. Just that I think it would be good if there might be extra predictions that well there are predictions it has made that haven't been confirmed.
Hello, Jason.
Yet. Hey, Jason.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Not much. How you doing?
Good. Keep going.
Oh, I was just gonna finish off with, I just think that inflation predicts gravitational waves in the CMB, for example. So if we were to ever find those, that would be evidence for inflation. So I just think that something like that, a prediction we wouldn't necessarily expect from other models, would kind of back inflation up even more so than it is right now. That's all I would say.
So, and I've brought this up to you before, the idea of like hybrid models between inflationary scenarios and cyclical scenarios. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because you said that you like cyclical, but you also recognize that inflation is widely accepted in cosmology right now. So what do you think about those hybrid models?
I definitely think the two aren't mutually exclusive necessarily. I guess it's kind of hard to reconcile them as far as I'm aware, but I mean, who knows? If I think I've told you this before, though, like if we do find a model that has aspects of both and some aspects of neither, that's kind of would be totally unsurprising for me, at least. So to me, at least, maybe it's conceivable, at least, that both are not the whole story. That maybe they'll contribute something to our say quantum theory of gravity that might explain this period of time. But I don't know. I don't want to ramble on too much. Sorry for the noise in the background.
So this is your senior year of high school, or almost done a senior year, or?
Huh? Me?
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna be starting community college in a few days, actually.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Running into the pack of wolves. What's your semester looking like?
Let's see. I have historical geology, or for this semester at least, I have historical geology, history of American cinema, philosophy, and English. I think those are my current ones for this semester at least.
Nice.
So I think it'll be fun to learn about.
Historical geology.
Yeah,
What was that?
Pretty fun
Historical
stuff.
geology. That's cool.
Oh, thank you.
Sounds like a freshman level course, yeah.
And you must be taking that philosophy course as an elective, yeah?
I'm not sure actually. I don't think so.
It's just odd to have philosophy as a requirement for a particular major, but I thought that was funny because you were just talking before about how you didn't particularly care for philosophy, and it sounded like
I didn't say I necessarily don't care for philosophy. I mean, like, or maybe I did. I don't care for it as much as the physical sciences, but I do think it's important, and maybe it would be good to learn about the basics of it at least. That's kind of why I'm taking it.
Yeah, I mean, I think philosophy directs science as much as science directs philosophy in a way, and it's a really interesting kind of like interplay between the two that you kind of have to appreciate. Like especially when it comes down to like fundamental physics, like in frontiers in physics that are currently being explored. Some of those, like some of the explanations being put forth are like philosophically pretentious, but physically they could work. Like for instance, the direction of the arrow of time, like is one of those things that's hard to explain, and there's a lot of kind of, as much as we understand with physics, there's also an element of philosophy that plays into it about what types of assumptions we should and should not make about like how to predict this thing and stuff like that.
Sure.
Hey, I was just gonna say, since you're starting like this, the first semester for you, don't automatically assume what your major is going to be. You know, like give yourself some time to take some classes to think about it. You know, because I can't tell you how many freshmen I've talked to are like, oh, I'm going to be a pre-med major. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then everything completely gets turned on its head. So don't.
Do you, yeah, that's also true. Do you not need to do any math?
I think, because I took AP Calculus actually this year. So that should cover it for a little bit at least.
Yeah, so you don't need to take like some of the baby stuff. So
yeah, that's good.
Wow, so you can actually get some of the science stuff out of the way if you decide to take physics and stuff.
Not trying to or maybe a little bit, but not. Well, I don't mean to brag, but actually I'm kind of proud of myself this year because I got some high AP scores. They're out of 5 in my community, at least. I don't know if that's everywhere. But let's see, for AP Calculus at least, and this was completely surprising to me. I didn't think I was going to score that high, but I got a 5 out of 5. So
nice. That's freaking cool. Nice.
Sorry, my dog is chewing on something in the background.
Yeah, calculus can be a rough subject for a lot of people. It's fairly challenging for people like that are just starting to learn it, and that's good. I mean, for me, Calc 1 was probably the hardest calculus course I took.
Oh, yeah.
Calc 2 and 3 were a lot easier for me.
So had you had no calculus in high school when you took it immutable?
No, I didn't take any AP courses when I was in high school. Yeah. I learned calculus. I learned calculus when I was in uni.
Well, there was a kid. I stayed in a dorm my first year, and there was a fellow freshman down the hall that had like calculus in high school or whatever. And so I was spent a lot of time around him trying to figure that stuff out. I wouldn't have made it through Calculus 1 without him.
Yeah, there's certain tricks you pick up to kind of learn Calculus 1 and how to deal with it. It trains your mind to think about problems in a different way that algebra doesn't really expose you to. And it's important if you're doing like physics or stuff like that. It comes in handy for chemistry as well, but I think biology you usually get more into statistics, and unless you're doing like really involved mathematical statistics, you don't use too much calculus.
Yeah. And actually, a mathematical statistics class is a great. I recommend that to most.
I'm taking probability and stats. Next semester, actually.
Good.
My second bachelor's is in math, so I'm required to take probability and stats 1. It's essentially calculus-based statistics.
Yeah. All the more like integrated math and stat classes that are mathematically oriented that have a statistical relationship are really super valuable, because you kind of start to bridge the applied aspects of some of the mathematical concepts and techniques that you learn. And that's the bridge to other scientific disciplines like geology or chemistry or biology, etc., is when you start to apply those methods and integrate them with the other scientific hypotheses. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of folks that are mathematicians, but they don't know any statistics. They're like,
really, that's interesting. I thought usually that's pretty par for the course in terms of like mathematicians having to learn at least like basic mathematical statistics.
I mean, I know. I mean, I work with a woman who's like a number theory person, and
there we go.
She's like, I think she only statistics she knows is because, like, she had to teach a stats class one time, and so she's like, "Oh, I have to like learn stats to teach the class." So, which is kind of funny. There's kind of a meme there of professors like the night before learning the discipline to teach it.
Yeah, it's interesting. My university stopped offering introductory number theory, which I'm kind of disappointed with.
Yeah,
that's a shame.
If I may ask a random question for Jason, so we were talking earlier about Christian I can't pronounce it. Christian. Yeah. How familiar are and what are your thoughts or refutations of it?
That's a lot. that's a loaded.
Wait, that's a loaded question.
Yeah. What do I know about it? My knowledge. I'm always leery to make any claims. I see Danny's in the room. Danny obviously is pretty knowledgeable in the philosophical topics. I am not a philosopher. My only knowledge is essentially like listening to other philosophers, listening to other presuppositionalists like pose their arguments and thinking about those concepts of like, the presupposing reason and how do you know what you know and those concepts. So I would probably say my knowledge of it is somewhat superficial.
Okay. Have you heard of transcendental arguments?
Yeah,
Andrew.
Barely.
The idea of a transcendental argument is that it shows that X is necessary to have Y, and Y is some kind of like obvious fact, like that you're not going to like
sort
of let go. So for instance, like you have beliefs and you have some kind of series of events in which you think, and you need to presuppose time to make sense of that succession. So time is indispensable for having a succession of thought, Right. So what they try to do is they try to play those games with God, right? Saying how somehow God is the same way, that to have intelligibility, to have thought, to have knowledge, you need God. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another way of saying this is that God is epistemically necessary, which is to say, to have knowledge, you must know God. Right? Just like to have a succession of thought, there must be time. So something like that.
My problem with it, at least, is that axiom doesn't seem justifiable.
Yeah, there are
at least a lot of weird don't justify it.
Well, it's weird because presumably they want to say they have like what you're saying, they have a justification for God, but it, like for instance, they want to say that you need to believe in God or at least know God to be able to reason, okay, or perceive things in an accurate way. And then when you ask them why do they believe in God, they appeal to biblical text, right? But there, when they might say it's the Bible that justifies my belief in God or whatever, but they're presupposing their cognitive faculties when they're reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah, they assume the inference to that necessity between the two things that they put up, and they always do that. They just assume it. They never back.
It's all they can do.
Right, because making that inference would be very, very difficult.
So the way that they try to make that inference is by what they call the impossibility of the contrary. Right. So basically what's going on, presuppositionalism starts with this dude, Abraham Kuyper, who really started to stress the idea of Calvinism as a comprehensive worldview. And under him came Gordon Clark and Cornelius Van Til, who took this idea and ran with it in slightly different directions. And then from Van Til's line, you ended up with Greg Bahnsen, who made an absolute fool of Gordon Stein in a famous debate, by the way, by bringing tag when nobody expected it. It had been basically unheard of by that time, and he used it and really pounced on Stein and gave him a whooping. I think that was like in the 1990s. And then John Frame, Michael Butler, Douglas Jones, a bunch of guys from mostly from the Van Til line, I think, but they still reference Gordon Clark. He's still somebody who's like applicable to them. But basically what they go for is the impossibility of the contrary. And what they're trying to argue is that it's only Christianity alone, that gives you a comprehensive view of the world that works, where you actually can function in a sensible way. And no other worldview can do this for you. And because of that, because of the impossibility of any contrary position other than Christianity, they know it's certainty that Christianity is true.
But it just seems like that's circular in the sense that I guess what they're saying is that it's impossible for there to be any other answer to the as Darth puts it, like how do you know where do facts come from? That it's impossible that facts come from any place but God. And if you were to say, well, we can probabilistically assess, like based on what we know of the universe, that I can reason and I don't need to know God to have those facts. He would say, well, you can't know that absolutely. Based on their worldview, they're like, well, look, you can't know that where reason comes from. You have no final answer to that. You have no absolute answer to that. Therefore, what you're saying is incoherent. Therefore, it's impossible. Thus, my position of God is correct. It just seems really a circular.
It's intellectually lazy.
They would agree with you that it's, at least many of them would agree with you that it's circular, but they would make a distinction because there are different kinds of circularity. There's virtuous circularity and vicious circularity.
Yeah.
So they would maintain that position as virtuously circular.
I've heard that.
I have only heard that distinction ever used by presuppositionalists.
Yeah. No, you can find it elsewhere. There's even like Wikipedia articles on the difference between virtuous and vicious circularity.
What's the
coherentists are gonna say there's some kind of virtuous circularity.
Yep. And rely on it.
What exactly is it in a nutshell?
Okay. That this issue of they could say, well, I absolutely know that God exists, through whatever divine and special revelation. To me, it constantly seems like it's all probabilistic. It's all like you can't know anything. You can only know within a certain level of certainty whether something is the case or not. So then it just becomes kind of like a either or. It's like which one is more probable. Like you can't know for absolutely certain that God exists. You can only assess the probability of the likelihood of God, which I know some people try to use this is Bayesian apologetic, which I find just insulting to Bayes' law. I get so irritated when I hear people try to talk about conditional probabilities and prior probabilities with relationships to God. I'm just like,
you would have a hoot with the literature on the resurrection and Bayes' theorem, like applying Bayesian probability to assessing the historical reliability of the resurrection. There's a lot of articles out there on that, and that's a lot of fun. But they'll respond to you though about your point about probability. So probability, for example, using induction, how do you justify that? They have a God who will guarantee the uniformity of nature, so you can make those inferences from simple enumeration and things like that if there's a God. But if there is no God, you have no grounding for that. So this whole appeal to probability just assumes their worldview.
Well, I also saw this on the line that like God could change the laws at whim. So how can we assume that induction will remain constant even then?
Yep, I think that's a good response. I also liked what Danny was saying earlier about how when they rely on revelation, but the way that they came to understand that revelation is through their own faculties. So they had to make that supposition first that it was reliable in order to properly understand what the revelation had to say to begin with. Right.
Or this kind of, oh, sorry, if I can say one more thing.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. It's totally fine.
So Redefined Living actually gave this example of, well, you can't trust your senses because if you have 10 people and there's an unknown object in the box and they all find the wrong answer, then you can't trust your senses. But to me, that seems kind of a contradiction, because how did you determine that they all got it wrong? Through your senses. So that seems to kind of be denying the thing, or using the thing you're denying to deny the thing that you're, I don't know.
Yeah, there's one of the guys who's like related to some of the Reformed apologists. He would probably count among them. I just can't remember for sure. But William Alston is a colleague of Alvin Plantinga, and he wrote a book on the reliability of sense perception, basically coming to the conclusion that you can't justify sense perception. There's no independent means to, but you're not irrational for supposing that it's reliable, was basically his conclusion as I remember it.
Right. Well, kind of at that point, they kind of say you're just appealing to consensus at that point of different people's senses, and that's not necessarily infallible, which I agree it isn't.
Yeah, I don't.
It all comes down to probabilities, like Jason said.
So how would you guys respond to the whole argument? Well, actually, no, never mind. I'm sorry. Andrew already did respond in terms of God breaking the uniformity of nature with miracles and stuff like that. Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a valid response. That's part of Michael Martin's Tang counter argument to Tag.
You know, I heard you mention about Michael Martin before. Those debates with, I forget who he debated, Martin and Frame debates? Is that what it was?
He debated John Frame and I think Michael Butler too.
Yeah, those are just like, they're like necessary reading. You know, they really are fascinating to see their kind of response, rebuttal, and to read those. I thought it was really fascinating, particularly in thinking about presuppositionalists and like how to combat those positions philosophically. I thought it was really good.
I thought Martin, like, if he was trying to troll them, he really succeeded by like taking that facetious kind of counter argument there. I thought that was absolutely hilarious, and I really enjoyed reading through those debates too. The Internet Infidels still has tons of great material that people can go through. They had that great debate a while back with like everybody under the sun, Quentin Smith and Alvin Plantinga and Andrew Melnick, and all sorts of people were involved in that great debate. They've got a lot of good stuff up there.
So Icarus said that their argument is an appeal to consequences fallacy. Do you guys agree with that?
So no, not really. Like basically, I understand what's being said there. Like, well, you wouldn't like the consequences of basically accepting some kind of ridiculous worldview. And so, you shouldn't do that. You should go with theism that gives you a sensible worldview. But I think it's stronger than that, because they're trying to suggest that there's an incoherence. And if that's the case, then they would actually be demonstrating contradiction, which isn't an appeal to consequence. It's not a fallacy.
And the position of like God exists because if God wouldn't exist, you couldn't rely on your senses, makes the assumption that God's existence, like, we have no way of determining that. We have no way to determine that, without God, I couldn't rely on my senses. There's no, there's no way of evaluating that, and therefore then there's no way of concluding that God exists, because it doesn't make any sense to me. So,
well, I mean, don't you think it might be evaluated in the sense that if we have positive theories that do account for the things in question, that that would actually count as a defeater to what they're saying, because it actually would be possible to justify these things without appealing to the divine?
I'm not sure I quite understand. Could you restate it? Say that again.
So basically they're saying, well, you can't account for this, and this. And when you try to, it's just nothing but a bunch of incoherent contradictions. But if you come up with a viable theory that does account for A, B, and C, doesn't that defeat them right there? Because there's the viable model right in front of your face.
Well, but once again, if, let's say, I come up with a theory that has some explanatory power for those positions or those statements, I can't prove that from an absolute certainty perspective. I can't, like, all of science is provisional. I can't prove it absolutely. I mean, I guess there are some things that we can make absolute certain claims, but most things we cannot. And so there's always that room for doubt, and I think that's where they wiggle in. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, no, I think that's usually how it operates. I've said a couple times recently that I think that the way that the apologetic usually works is by trying to find the skeptic's boundary of knowledge, like, right there at the end where they don't understand things anymore, and they focus in on that. Okay, you don't understand it at this point, and they try to
pretty much
down there. Yeah,
they're being intellectual bullies, essentially.
You guys brought this site up. Is this the one, Internet Infidels?
Yeah, yep, that's it already.
Where would you find a debate like the one you were talking about?
So if you go to their library and then choose their modern library, but you also see debates there as well. I already had you click past it, but debates, I'm sure it's in there. But also if you go to their modern library with their God or Blind Nature, Philosophers Debate the Evidence 2007 with Paul Draper. That's got all sorts of Charles Taliaferro there that you see is a philosopher, a Christian apologist and a philosopher who concentrates on the philosophy of mind. Andrew Melnick is a physicalist, philosopher of mind.
Who was that Martin guy that you mentioned before?
Oh, Michael Martin. He's like, I would consider him the #1 atheist philosopher of the last century.
By the way, they have some good articles about the Shroud of Turin in there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff.
Remember, the Shroud of Turin had to be Jesus.
It just had to be if Jesus were a big, tall, distorted Neanderthal.
I know.
So
there's no other explanation. None.
Cannot be. It has to look just like Jesus. Man, you know what Jesus looked like. You know in your heart.
Pareidolia. Can't be that.
No, not at all. Wishful thinking.
I had one more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Michael Martin died in
2013, a few years ago now.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to link him in the a Wikipedia article on him and the infidels. A couple of links to infidels for people who care about the description. So anyway, that's all I care about.
Sure. Just to say a word about Michael Martin. So some of his books include The Improbability of God, The Impossibility of God. My favorite one by him is called Atheism, a Philosophical Justification, which, even though it's old, is still, in my opinion, the best systematic defense of atheism as a philosophical position in print. It does defend some positions that I don't think are viable. Like it still tries to make a case for logical positivism and stuff like that. And I think that's just no go. But overall, the book is very effective at what it sets out to do. And then Atheism, Morality, and Meaning, where he gives an ideal observer theory as a moral objectivism for atheism, which I also don't think is really terribly successful. But nevertheless, he makes like a bunch of arguments there for the viability of moral realism on atheism that I think work very well, and a bunch of other stuff.
So, or should I ask my thing now?
Sure.
So Jason, I don't know if we've ever gone over, because since you're an actual scientist, I don't know if we've actually discussed the what I think are the three broad axioms that science starts with. Have we?
I don't think we have.
Okay. Would it be okay if I maybe listed out my conception of them, and you can, I guess, check that?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
So to me, science starts with the three axioms that one, there is some kind of objective reality out there, wherever it may be. Two, that we can investigate and understand that reality through through empirical means, through observation and the senses, and that what those observations tell us can be understood rationally by our minds, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably some more formal constructs that might be more. They may make it a little clearer. I mean, certainly,
Right.
I think that what you're phrasing, you're kind of hitting on it. There's probably you probably could put it maybe a little better, but
Yeah.
certainly.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, Midnight?
Hello.
Really, sorry, Jason. If
Yeah,
I
go
could,
for it. Go for it.
somebody's mentioned something in the chat here. Where'd it go? Super Kami Guru says someone advocates for logical positivism but advances ideal observer theory, and they're smart to catch on to that because the logical positivists argued for basically that morality was non-cognitive, and a bunch of them appeal to like an emotive understanding of morality and stuff. But yep, nevertheless, he was a moral realist.
Super Kami Guru. I really like that name. Sorry, I just wanted to comment on that.
And I'll say one last thing, and then Andrew and Jason take it away. But I had him. I used to be a radio show producer, and I had him appear on a program a long time ago. And I was able to call in and ask him the quintessential objection to logical positivism, which is, okay, so how do you verify your verifiability criterion of meaning? Like, doesn't it contradict itself? And his response was really weak. It was that he didn't think it was fair to apply the criteria to the criteria. And I didn't really think that really did the job that it needed to do. But yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to get that out there for Super Kami Guru.
Sure.
I love that name.
I didn't know you used to be a radio host.
Yep.
You've got that radio voice, that's for sure.
Oh, I was just the producer. I got the academic guys on the show. I wasn't the actual interviewer.
Leo, what side is the port?
Port is left side in nautical terms. I'm sorry, because I know you were there for a little bit, Jason. I don't know this, I don't know that. Why are you asking me about this? I can't prove this, I can't prove that. I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't know that, I know this. But I know that it's all a big conspiracy. It's all a big conspiracy, guys.
What happened?
Oh my
What
God.
the fuck happened exactly?
a debate. Me and RJ were debating Alex Stein from Conspiracy Castle and Rose 777 on did the Titanic really sink? And they were pushing this idea that the Titanic and the Olympic, which were two sister ships, got swapped somehow for insurance reasons, even though they wouldn't have gotten even remotely close to what the ships cost in insurance fund. Like oh my God. Holy like shit. That Alex guy, oh my God, dude. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
I didn't stay for very long, but I got to give props to RJ. He seems like he really dug in pretty deep on all that shit.
Yeah. That seems like a pretty weird point to kind of like nail yourself to in terms of like playing denialism on.
You know, that sinking. Nuts, man. That guy, he's just looking to be a contrarian and pick a position and try to argue the opposite. You know, but
be
Leo,
loud
I would commend Leo for like just asking questions. Is that how
that's pretty much all I did in that debate. Like there was one time I asked Alex, I said, so if the Olympic and the Titanic had gotten switched, they would have switched the names of the ships. So like, nobody knew. And he's like, yeah. And I said, so if they switched the names and the Olympic was renamed the Titanic, so then it's the Titanic, technically. So then, technically, the Titanic is what sunk. I mean, what? And he sat quiet for like 5 seconds before providing an answer that wasn't even anything remotely close to an answer to my question. It was, oh my God, it was funny. It was, holy shit. Icarus, I'm waiting for it to start. I don't believe it started yet.
What started?
I will. Dapper Dinos after show.
Leo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Andrew, if you have any... Oh, fuck, what did I just do? Oh, shit. Oh, no, I just muted. Okay. So, yeah, Andrew, if you have any questions, ask them now, because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. I don't know if you have any questions. You might not. There's better people to go to. So.
I could think of one, but...
No. Don't think of questions. I just didn't know if you had any.
Not really.
Don't stress yourself. I don't want you to do that.
But, you know, that debate is an example. When I saw the title of that debate, it made me think, like... And this is really an interesting thing that I don't think many people talk about, but like, all props to James, whatever. I like James, but you know, like modern day debate claiming that they're a neutral platform, they prop up these like arguments or these debates. And it's kind of like, did the Titanic sink? It's kind of like, one, it's clickbait, and two, it actually just reinforces these like positions from like quackpots. To like, for people who are like, wow, maybe that is actually the case. Like, all debates are not like neutral, like questions like this or this. It's not a fair question to say, you know, did the Titanic really possibly sink? Like, are there fairies? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Both sides are equal. I hate that. I mean, it just makes it so there are some people out there that are like, well, maybe I should maybe I should consider that the Titanic didn't sink. Like, I think that's dangerous. I don't think they should be doing that kind of stuff. So, anyways, whatever. I mean,
actually,
flat Earth, like the crazy.
Yeah, well, Alex is a flat earther, and Rose is pretty much a flat earther too. So.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think there is a healthy level of skepticism to have towards a certain thing, but some of these cats take it a little too far. Like, they're just like hyper skeptical. Well, okay. Trying to be generous here. Yeah, some people take it too far and just they won't accept anything like that contradicts or, you know.
Why are you trying to be too far?
What?
Why am I trying to be too far?
No, lenient. Sorry, it got mixed up. Go ahead.
I never want to assume the worst of a person until they've shown me that they're just being like malicious or just.
Well, I think
like,
really
stupid
go
fuck.
too far while still genuinely believing in something. Like the people who genuinely believe that like homosexuality is wrong, but like also want to kill them, but they like genuinely believe that have gone too far, but they still genuinely believe it.
Yeah, for me, I mean, there's some people like who know that they're being dishonest in certain debates, or they know that they're being deceptive with certain rhetoric that they're utilizing. And yeah, that's the type of thing I take issue with more than anything else.
You could be somebody that actually believes a particular position. That still doesn't mean that the debate is like that it's a fair debate where one person's got a position that, like, you know,
well, the fact that the thing is being questioned tells you something about the people like who are wanting to host the debate itself.
I mean,
right?
I use flat Earth as an example because it's so ridiculous, but it's, again, as a climate scientist, like I get exposed to people who are like, you can't prove that the climate is actually changing and it's caused by man. It's a very and again,
except we
science,
can.
It's well, the climate science is a very it's complicated. We can show that, but it's not just like I got a thing here that I can show you and says yes, there you go. But we do have overwhelming evidence because of that diffuse nature of the science. It allows people to come up with conspiracy ideas, and so that's why I don't think it's legit for people to be like, we should have a debate on this topic, even though the overwhelming position of all scientists is against that position. It gives credence to something that, like, literally nobody believes, you know. I mean, I'm talking about like flat eartherism. So
well, I mean, that's
what. Oh god.
That's kind of why I say like that young Earth creationism is like flat Earth 2.0.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'd love to have a debate with somebody on that, on young Earth or young Earth creationism. What were you going to say, Andrew?
Oh, I was just going to say, kind of to rephrasing. I feel like what you were trying to say. Like they in these debates they talk about one specific line of evidence while ignoring the others, and since they only go over that line of evidence and sometimes one side is victorious over the other, in the eyes of the audience, it gives the impression that the other lines of evidence don't exist.
Sure.
Is that kind of what you were saying?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what I was saying, but I mean, I think you're making a good point, particularly around like the aspects of a model. Like, you know, if we have a model that has different components that interact with each other, you know, you can't just hold up one small sliver of one facet of the model and try to dispute that using some information when there are other components that are related to that model that need to be considered that reinforce the you know.
The hell was that? Sorry, I just heard a weird noise.
Flat earthers do that all the time. They pick out one little thing and they're like, what about this? You know, and we can be like, well, we have a model of the earth and we can explain why that's the case. Not only that issue, but we can show how it's related to like 15 other things. And when you look at all 15 things, they all work together. They all reinforce each other. But you take one thing from flat earth and you're like, show me your flat earth model and how it interrelates. As you bring in other things, you're like, when I bring this in and I interact it with what you're talking about, your model fucking totally fails. Not to mention if I bring in all of these things, they like. So
I do have a quick question.
Yeah, it's kind of off. I did actually have a question for you, Leo, after you ask yours.
No, it's all good. Speed. You know what, Andrew? You should probably ask your question first because mine's a little off topic and it might diverge things a little bit. It's not bad or anything, but it might.
So it's kind of the same question I asked Jason. What are your thoughts on the validity of transcendentalism, that kind of apologetics, basically?
Oh man,
okay. That's a loaded question. But
yeah, it's pretty loaded.
I mean,
hold on. I'm confused. How is this question loaded? He's just asking, like, what is my opinion on these particular philosophical ideologies that some people adhere to?
No, I'm just saying it's complicated. I'm just saying that the presuppositionalist question is complicated.
Right.
So, I mean, only thing I would say on it is that I find the presuppositionalist arguments as very, like, I don't agree with them, but they're like one of the most compelling arguments
really?
for God claim.
I would disagree with that, but I'd be curious to. I shouldn't have interrupted you. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, it's all good. No, I think that, like the issues of like us not knowing with absolute certainty certain things, and for science to say, look, we can't be absolutely certain of anything or most things. There are some things we can be absolutely certain, but the predominant things in science, we can say with a certain level of probability that we know for certain, but we can't know absolutely certain. And some people see that as a weakness of science. It's actually a strength of science. But when a presuppositionalist attacks that portion and goes after that, like, I find it compelling because most scientists and atheists have poor answers for that. They can't respond to it other than, when you're like, look, if you can't know where reason comes from, then your entire position fails. You're incoherent. You can't know where reason comes from. How do you know that what your reasoning is? Are you certain about that? How do you know where certainty comes from? I understand that those are kind of like fucked up questions that can be circular, but I just find the arguments compelling, and I constantly see very smart people when up against Darth, who I know people think is a dick and a dumbass.
Yes.
Doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, but you know what? He runs his argument really well, and many smart people have gone up against him and have ended up. I mean, granted, he does rude things. He cuts people off. He mutes them. He does a bunch of things that are dishonest and inappropriate. Like I was watching Leo's debate with Darth. Like, Leo's going at him really good, but Darth's doing his typical thing, and he's like muting him and over talking him and calling him names and things like that. All those things are inappropriate, but the argument in and of itself is, I'm not saying it has validity. I'm just saying it's a robust argument that lots of people
If you've never been exposed to it, you're going to kind of flounder.
Yeah, I thought I said on another stream, Danny, you might have been there, that some of these arguments can be, I think it was on Germania's last night. I don't know if you were there or not, Danny, but I think you were. But I said a lot of these arguments, like the Kalam cosmological argument, even a lot of the presuppositional arguments, prima facie, they sound convincing. But if you know enough that you already have a background in them, or you know enough to ask the right questions and to be like, okay, but how do we really know this or know that? You can at least, you have the ability to, whether you apply it or not, you have the ability to dig into these arguments. There were a few things that I wanted to comment on. The first one is a response to a comment that Maya Atkinson made to Daniel Bennett. She said there is no quote unquote evidence of atheism. I disagree. I think there is a lot of evidence for atheism personally. And she continues, it's a default position when you reject evidence of a God. I suppose some people might define it that way. I don't think that's wrong. I wouldn't describe that as wrong. But I don't think that generally nor normatively that's what atheism is understood as being. It's a propositional belief that which one believes that God doesn't exist, but I understand not everybody wants to use it that way, and that's fine. That's not that big of a deal. The other thing I wanted to say, just to answer Andrew's question, I don't really know what transcendentalism is. In terms of like presuppositional arguments or transcendental arguments, I don't think they're very strong at all. I think that somebody who is, versed enough in particularly things like metaphysics and epistemology as well as logic. And certainly if you're talking with somebody who knows like philosophy of mathematics and things like that, because then they know logic, I think is certainly well equipped to be able to handle these arguments and address these. I think I agree with a lot of what Jason said in that these transcendental arguments that presuppositionalists use, number one, prima facie, they are quite convincing. And number two, they can be refuted, I think, quite easily, but and I would be curious, both Jason and Danny's opinion on this. It does require, I think that transcendental arguments are one that require a little bit more of a knowledge of certain aspects of philosophy to really be able to take down. And that's where it becomes, where you find a lot of people struggling, is that, and it might sound harsh, but it's not what I'm trying to say, is that a lot of people might not have that particular background to be able to properly address these arguments. Like, I've heard a lot of people sort of like make objections that like are reasonable, but I could see how a presuppositionalist would respond. But if they were to take their objection, a couple steps further, I think they'd have a really solid point. Like, people can sort of reason themselves toward the major objections to these, but I have to be honest, I don't often see people go all the way there. And I just think that the structure of these arguments is such that you just a little bit more technicality behind them. Not like a lot. I mean, look at Darth Dawkins, but a little bit more than what you would expect.
It won't change the outcome of the conversation, though. I mean, precepts won't acknowledge counter arguments to their position.
Well, I mean, like Darth Dawkins won't.
Yeah, I mean, in Darth's, like, I was just pulled up. I have this PowerPoint of like Darth's arguments and but he constantly says, do you believe it's not necessary to reference God as the necessary precondition of all facts? Or that do you not believe that what is fundamental to reality is the mind that's the source of all possibility and impossibility? He naturally phrases it as the most convoluted statement
He's
possible.
A sophist. He's not trying to converse with you. He's trying to confuse you and then bully you into a particular position that he can then browbeat you on at a moment's notice. That's all he wants to do.
And this is actually a question for Danny and Leo, which is Darth constantly uses the definition that God is this necessary being. Like, he comes up with this standard definition and he starts from that you assume that this is what God is. I always feel like that's a flaw in the argument because he's just assuming that that's the definition of God. Is that inappropriate, though? Because from a philosophical
perspective, do you think God is necessary?
Really quickly. Danny, can I answer first? Icarus just told me Dapper's waiting for me, so I want to get there. Icarus, if you would be willing to tell him that give me about like 2 minutes and I'll be there. He can start if he wants to, but oh my God, I'm sorry. Jason, can you like summarize your question? My memory, that debate fucked me up, dude.
Is God necessary? Is the definition of God as a necessary being that accounts for all facts and all reality? Is that just a given philosophical definition that should be assumed, or is that assumption like a flaw in Darth's argument?
Personally, I think that there's definitely faults in that. For me, it really gets into like the conversations of what kind of knowledge we're having and whether you can really consider it something along the lines. So what Darth is trying to say, and this is steel manning a little bit, so it might not be perfect, but he's wanting to say something like that God is a properly basic belief, which is how Alvin Plantinga would put it. But I'm not necessarily opposed to that immediately, or the idea that God is a necessarily extant being. It's when it's argued that he must necessarily be the foundation for things like reason and logic and mathematics. I definitely think there's convincing arguments that even if we granted that God is some necessary being, that him being a necessary foundation for all like facts and all these other fancy words that these people want to use does not necessarily follow from that.
Okay.
Nice
job tonight, though, Leo.
We got somebody waiting to get in, so if somebody is going to
I do. Yeah, I'm going to drop, but I do want to hear Danny's response first. Just because I'm curious.
There are some philosophers of religion that think God is contingent. Richard Swinburne thinks God is contingent. But it is pretty standard to think God is necessary. And but that doesn't, the whole, like, the ontological argument is supposed to argue that it tries to extrapolate necessity from the concept of the greatest conceivable being in the first place, and that's of course contentious. But you could think of some kind of necessary thing, and you could just say that, well, if that thing exists in one world, it would exist in all worlds because that kind of thing is necessary. But then you could just follow up. Well, like, I don't think such a thing exists, and so then it doesn't. You could still say I don't think. How do I phrase it? Like, you could just not think that necessary being exists and that wouldn't be like contradictory. So you're not necessarily defining that exists. You're more saying, when they're saying it's a necessary being, they're saying that if that being exists and it exists in all worlds, something like that.
I mean, Darth runs that argument because he starts off with asking somebody, are they an atheist or are they agnostic? And somebody's like, I lack belief in God. And then he's like, well, where do you think facts come from? He's essentially getting you to a point where you're like, you cannot make a claim that you lack belief. You either believe in God or you do not believe in God. You cannot be I lack belief in God, because that doesn't work with God. It works with other things, but not for God. That you cannot be agnostic with regards to the existence of God. That's where
I've never understood that.
The whole thing with Darth is that there is no neutrality.
Danny, that's a really, like, there's been a couple, like Alex Malpass really kind of dissected this position of Darth's of like, and he's got a propositional logic statement on it. It's something like, if God exists, I would know it. I'm horrible at these propositional, like.
Well, you're trying to recall from memory. That's not easy.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so it's like.
No, he has an analogy regarding like making toast on his blog. I think reason2believe.com. Yeah. That he's got that blog. He's got a statement about Darth about this argument. Yeah. Well, for the most of it is he intimately dissects Darth's approach on his blog, wherein he explains that the central thesis that presuppositionalists wish to advance is that this is a foundational belief, and it's a necessary belief that everybody has to have if you were to have a coherent worldview. And his response to that is just don't even bother trying to argue with them about that. Just ask them to prove it, because that's a positive claim. Because at that point, really, when you stop and think about it, whatever your worldview is, it doesn't actually matter. Because they're not just making a claim about your worldview, they're making a claim about every proposed worldview and every worldview that has yet to have been proposed.
Yeah.
And so, like, are they going to provide infinite number of individual refutations of worldviews, or are they just going to provide a categorical one? Unfortunately, there has been no categorical worldview, like no defeater for all other worldviews presented thus far, other than just reasserting that the only worldview that makes sense of X, Y, and Z is my particular interpretation of the Christian worldview. Not necessarily the Christian worldview, but that strict interpretation of it.
Yeah. The what Malpass's statement of Darth's argument is, if God exists, then you would know he exists. Then the second statement is, you do not know that God exists, and you do not know that he does not exist. Therefore, you know that God does not exist. That's where he's going with that, which is kind of a little complicated. But anyways, you should. I mean, if you haven't looked at the Malpass's Use of Reason blog, it's like useofreason.wordpress.com.
Yeah, I take him very seriously.
Yeah, I like Malpass, and I find he's very calm, and he wants to understand, and he gets a little flustered with Darth, but he manages to keep his cool usually. So he's just interested in the philosophy.
Well, no, he's just interested mainly in the logic of it, because if you press Alex on anything, it's like he's very reserved about his beliefs, and he's very honest about them, though. But he doesn't have a firm stance on much, and that's to be expected. He's a logician by profession. Like, that's what his job is that he analyzes logic and he studies logic itself. And so, on the finer points of philosophy, he's not sold on many things, because he can inevitably find issue with anything.
When I talk to him, you have to get him isolated to get him to actually I was talking with him privately in a two or three other people, and he just flat out affirmed that William Lane Craig's arguments are no good.
They're pretty shit.
but he's never going to say that in some kind of forum.
He's not going to say that in forum, because he does have to kind of entertain that kind of academic civility, and you have to be.
Yeah.
And he's also referenced that before, but it's like the arguments that Craig presents. There is a far less reserved philosopher on YouTube in this little corner of the internet who goes by the handle Sisyphus Redeemed, who has absolutely no problem just flat out saying William Lane Craig, yes, he is one of the most cited philosophers in philosophy of religion, but that is because he's an absolute hack and everyone wants to rip him apart.
Yeah.
Whether they be theist or atheist. And like if you actually survey the literature, kind of, but like he's a bit more emotive about it, and he's a bit more honest, and he doesn't really care as to whether or not it affects him among his peers.
I'd say definitely the atheists all want to tear him apart, and there are definitely Christians who will take issue with some of the things that William Lane Craig has to say. But over the course of the last several decades, that guy has built up an army of apologists at his disposal. He's not somebody who's just getting ripped on. He's got like
are they apologists at his disposal?
Oh, sure. I mean, like he's very closely when I talked before about how I used to be a radio show producer about a decade ago, and so I used to talk with a lot of these guys. So he's close friends with people like Gary Habermas, Michael Licona. He's also loosely associated with Alvin Plantinga, and then but there's all these other.
He didn't build up Alvin Plantinga, so that's a bad example.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you mean build them up in the sense that they?
I was just interpreting what you said. Like he has an army of apologists that he's built up or recruited around him, and it's Alvin Plantinga not so much. Alvin Plantinga has issued his.
It's
fair
quite the
criticism
opposite
against
with
Craig.
Plantinga.
So Bill Craig would draw on Plantinga, but in terms of building up an army of apologists around him, Craig doesn't necessarily have to be the source of all of their arguments. So if an independent apologist wants to come and team up with Craig, they can, and they're a force to reckon with. But I would still say that there are a ton of apologists who have developed themselves along Craig's line of apologetic, that his overall case dealing with cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, the moral argument, the resurrection argument, and so on, that you see in countless debates that basic framework used. As a matter of fact, so much so that James at Modern Day Debate, if you go and watch some of his old debates where he was the debater, he gets up on stage and pretty much gives you just a William Lane Craig apologetic right on down the line.
But again, that's just a random YouTuber that you're presenting. Whereas,
so what about Shandon Guthrie or James Sennett or Ruthowis?
The only thing that I would say, in light of what you've clarified there, is that William Lane Craig doesn't favor a direct approach to proving the existence of God or anything like that. What he prefers is presenting a cumulative case, which is all of the arguments in tandem could be presented as an argument for the existence of God or for Christianity in particular. Is that if you take all this mounting evidence and all of these mounting conclusions, you can make a case that the best explanation for why it is that all these things are the case is that God exists and it's a Christian God. That's not new to Craig. It's actually fairly standard in apologetics, but he certainly has sort of revitalized it, would be a good way of putting it. And a lot of YouTubers who fancy themselves apologists or evangelists certainly bootstrap them onto William Lane Craig's style of debating and his particular approach, because you have to remember that YouTube's only been around since 2006, and at that point what we had in terms of evangelists and apologists here on YouTube was Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron, Nephilim Free, and then William Lane Craig. Yeah, and Venom Fang X, of course, which he works for Ray Comfort now, so.
Oh, really? Does he?
Yeah, he does. So.
Oh, that's fitting.
Yeah. So, not exactly a diverse pool to draw on in terms of exposure.
I'm sorry. So that last line you said there, not exactly a diverse group of people for exposure. What did you mean there?
Well, it's like you have basically two different styles of apologetics, which is you have the everything that the Bible says at its core about history is true, the young Earth creationists, and then you had the more representative sample of modern day apologists, which is William Lane Craig, which were evidentialists who at least endeavor to explain how it is that their views are actually consistent with scientific findings and why it is that young Earth creationism is actually false. Those were really the only two groups that you had at the time, both evidentialists. And then 2009 rolled around, you had the Reason Rally, and Seitan Bruggencate showed up on the scene and reintroduced the world to presuppositional apologetics and just bastardized what he read from a Greg Bahnsen article, which Greg Bahnsen learned from Van Til, and there we have it. And now we have these three main categories that we can divide people into, and their approaches to evangelizing or proselytizing or just simply defending the faith from criticism.
Yeah, that sounds pretty generally accurate to me, the way that you're describing how all that pretty much unfolds. I wasn't like a big YouTube guy back in the day, so I'll take your word on that part of it. But in terms of like, the development of the field of the philosophy of religion and Christian apologetics, those three over the course of the last few decades have definitely been the main honchos.
Yes and no. Like the two main, obviously, would be the evidentialist approach, and presuppositionalism have been developed the most because presuppositionalism just got the most attention since 2009. You had people going into taking seminary classes or studying theology, or people studying philosophy of religion who were then interested in the works of Van Til or Clark. And so you saw a revitalization of presuppositional apology.
So I would actually on that one, there's a definite disagreement there, because presuppositionalism had its heyday, but if you actually want to like gauge the relative measures out of those three to see which ones are the two major ones today, I would give it to young Earth creationism, because they had a major revitalization over the course of the last like 10 to 15 years in terms of all of these guys who are hopping on now. Like you have John Sanford with genetic entropy, you have Nathaniel Jeanson with replacing Darwin, you have Jonathan.
Revitalization just means a renewed interest in this sense, which is that
and
Van Tilian and Clarkian apologetics kind of died out for about 20 years. Like a parallel to this would be that when Darwin introduced his theory of natural selection, interest in virtue ethics and moral philosophy kind of started to wane and then died out for a while until it was revitalized in the 1970s by individuals like Philippa Foot. And that doesn't mean it ever went away. It just means there's a renewed interest, that there's far more people. It's growing. It's not dominant, but it's growing in interest. And it's always important to remember that just because someone might be getting a lot of attention doesn't mean that they're actually representative of the group. So like there's a lot of young Earth creationists who like to make a lot of noise up here in Canada. They are not by any means representative of Christians here.
It seems, and I could be wrong on the statistics here, it seems like the majority of like activity surrounding young Earth creation is mostly like Americanized.
It is largely Americanized, but nevertheless, it's like if you
it exists
if you just turn on
stuff.
If you turn on the news, like if you turn on Canadian news and it's something to do with some religious debate, you're going to see like this batshit crazy young Earth creationist who thinks that the sky is a carpet painted by God, arguing against the existence of the International Space Station or something. And that's just because it makes for good TV. So like the loudest voice or the most heard voice isn't necessarily representative of the whole. And but in the case of William Lane Craig, no, like it's predominantly in literature been the predominant approach, is that you present these cumulative cases for the existence of God, and then you try to hone in on the Christian God in particular and try to argue for Christianity.
Yeah, so
like this kind of Aquinian approach would be a good way of putting it.
So yeah, and I'm totally agreement with you about the cumulative case thing. That's why when you were saying before that Craig is just there for people to rip on, I don't think that that's true, because that is the predominant approach taken by Christians today. So they're not just ripping on him.
Yeah, no. I'm not talking about his approach in that context. I'm sorry, I should clarify. Like what I was speaking about specifically was that there is a particular philosopher who doesn't shy away from sort of making himself a potential academic pariah by voicing explicitly his thoughts about other philosophers, wherein he says that William Lane Craig is just a hack, that William Lane Craig is not honest, that he deliberately misrepresents things or doesn't bother to read things before commenting on them. Like he did a video called William Lane Craig is not the Lucasian chair of mathematics, specifically addressing William Lane Craig's response to something that Stephen Hawking had written, where it became apparent that in the interview that William Lane Craig was participating in, Craig never read Stephen Hawking's work, and yet he was criticizing it as being ontologically relativistic, and then went on to defend Stephen Hawking's position that he was advocating for, because he never read the work. That's the only explanation for it, other than like you suffer so drastically in terms of reading comprehension that you should never have gotten a PhD in the first place, which seems ridiculous.
Yeah, so I'll totally get on board with the fellow that you're talking about in terms of understanding Craig as a hack. I'm not so sure I'd go so far as to say that he doesn't.
I don't think William Lane Craig is a hack person.
Yeah, I don't think he is either. I actually enjoy reading Craig.
I like Craig. I met Craig a couple of times. He's a perfectly. The only issue I actually have personally with Craig is his weird ass idea of animals. And he has this idea that they can't. This kind of weird Descartesian view that animals don't actually experience pain, or guilt, or anything. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez, that can't be a normal view.
Well, I'm sympathetic to that.
Like the thing that really threw me for a loop there was like
try Les Mills on demand for free and experience the.
All right, we're gonna get copyright struck for that.
What the fuck was that?
I guess this is monetized by proxy. So
I know.
Yeah, no, I still would say that he's a hack, though. He's a very well-dressed, well-spoken hack, but a hack. He's a used car salesman. I don't think for a second that he believes half of the things that come out of his mouth.
Oh, no, I think he believes for the vast majority. Like when it comes to specifically the defenses of Kalam, I take issue with that because he will talk out of both sides of his mouth in defense of particular premises, but it's understandable and acceptable in terms of the debate that he's having. And so I give him a pass on that.
I think he purposefully, constructs certain arguments that he knows are disingenuous. When he was having his debate with Jordan Peterson, and he gave the whole argument about everything just amounting to nihilism because of the eventual thermal equilibrium of the universe. And Jordan Peterson got up and started going into how that's really just an excuse not to act in the here and now, and going into how you shouldn't take this pessimistic, kind of despairing, nihilistic, fatalistic perspective. And when he was gunning back on that point, the facial expression that Craig had on his face was kind of like somebody who got caught with their hand in the cookie jar and then automatically went over to this very artificial, that's intriguing kind of look on his face. And it's just like, no, I don't buy for a second that he presented that argument authentically. I think that he knew full well that he was trying to get people to feel emotionally distressed and to get them feeling despairing toward their situation and stuff in order to hook them into his faith.
Could we just back the truck up for just a second? Danny, did you say you're sympathetic to the view that animals don't experience pain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I am too.
Yeah, I wanted to hear about that too.
I don't agree with it, but I'm sympathetic to it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to not think that they're in pain, but there's certain preconditions for pain it's hard to attribute to animals, like second order beliefs. I just find it so unintuitive that they have beliefs about their beliefs. I think that's necessary for pain. There's some considerations about language.
I don't think that's necessary
for
pain.
Well, do you think if something's in pain that they have to?
I don't think a toddler needs to think about its beliefs, like have beliefs about its beliefs in order to.
Well, let me explain. I just take pain to be a belief, to imply already a first order belief. So some views of pain don't involve that; they take it just to be qualitative. But I don't take that position. So the idea is that if you're in pain, on my view, you already have a first order belief. So to recognize what it means to recognize you're in pain is to have a second order belief.
Are you sure you're not referring to psychological?
Okay. So, yeah, like you're saying, like there's the experience of pain, basically, like just the biological response to it, and then basically there's the individual saying, "I am experiencing this, and this is bad." Yeah, I think that like some animals experience that, but not all of them.
Well, that would be the Buddhist version of suffering, the thinking about the pain after and extending the pain or anticipating.
Well, not even after, just during, because like a toddler, how long does their memory last?
Yeah.
Like the toddler at the very least has some self-referent where they go like, like, oh, I put my hand on the hot stove. I felt pain. They jerked your hand away. And then they contemplate the pain and they form the belief that I shouldn't do that.
But the brightest part of pain is the first order pain itself, and I don't think the belief is necessary in order.
Yeah, but that's also kind of the reason why I disagree with Danny here, because the fact that you have that self-reflection informs your future actions. So, like, fun example: if you talk about true crabs and true lobsters, because there's a fun little biological fact about arthropods is that apparently they all like to re-evolve into crabs somehow. But crabs will avoid future pain. Like if you put them in a cage where they have to navigate a maze with food in it, they will avoid touching the edges after that. Whereas lobsters won't. Lobsters will jerk back and then just like basically bump back into the wall.
Do it again.
The same thing with like you just need to look at a dog when it did something that it shouldn't have. Like when one of my dogs gets into the garbage, I know exactly which one of those dogs tore into the garbage.
Yep.
Because they're the one with the guilty expression on their face, and they're the ones hiding and shirking away from the mess that they made.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disputing that. If someone were to think that dogs and lobsters are in pain, I don't have any argument for them. I don't think there's anything to talk about. I'm just saying that there's a kind of skeptical issue over and above the behaviors that we see when we, let's say, see a dog whimper or cry out, or even a human. You could extend the skeptical problem all the way to humans. But the idea is that I attribute to human. I want to be clear that I think there is a view of pain that is merely qualitative. What I'm saying is that pain is a conjunction of a qualitative experience with the desire or a kind of
a sense of self.
Yeah, an aversion. Like there has to be some kind of aversion. Like otherwise, I don't take it to be pain. And I think to see something as aversive is to have a first order belief. So there are, like, if you think pain is just merely qualitative, then you're right. There's no second order belief. But to say when I'm in pain is to imply that I believe that I find something aversive, and that's second order.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing is that
Okay.
I tend to view that in dogs and in certain other animals, which is why I abstain from eating those animals. But
yeah, I have no problem with what you're just saying there.
Like another flip side to it would be like my general test of whether or not an animal matters that I have for myself is, does it do anything gratuitous? Which is, it does something just for the sheer fun of it. So like ravens and crows, one of my favorite videos on YouTube of all time is actually this video of a bunch of crows sitting on the perch of like a snow-capped house. And it looks like they're just falling off of it, like they can't stand their balance or something. And then there's just this one crow just sitting there watching them, and it flies off and comes back, and it has a little pot pie tin. And it balances it rather precariously on the perch of the house, and then uses it as a sled to slide down the house.
Yeah.
Goes and picks it up and does it again, and all the while imitating what I could only understand to be crows laughing. And then all the other crows, upon seeing this, went off and found their own sledding instruments. It's like at that point, they're just doing this sheerly for the fun of it. And it's like, if you're doing something simply because it's fun, that seems to display a level of awareness.
Yeah, I agree there. Like, I think the thing for me is that if you find yourself thinking that an animal has any belief, then I think, of course, then they have the capacity for pain. I think that to have a belief is to have a second order belief.
To hell with ants and to hell with insects and all that shit. But
yeah, I mean, and I don't really think it's really anything for me to argue, though. It's just like a lot of it is intuitive. A lot of it, what we're doing is the sort of inferences you are. We're seeing mirrored behavior, and then we're making inferences, and there's nothing wrong with that.
That's kind of the problem, is that it's not intuitive, because the only real standard that we have to evaluate this would be ourselves. And so we just look for things that seem to reflect or imitate characteristics and behavior that we display. But for all we know, it could be that, let's say, a salmon displays pleasure radically different than any animal analogous to us does.
I was going to say that, like, my significant other works at a research institution, and she does work. She's a child psychologist, so but one of the collaborators she works with is in vet med, and they do an extensive amount of biological research on animals playing and understanding brain activity and with animals. And my spouse does. They think about that research in the context of children as well. And
that sounds like my dream job.
I think there's a lot of compelling research around like animals play, and they derive value from it, and that there's like biochemical, there's things going on with the animals that are beneficial, and that they get value from that. So
drive this back to the topic at hand, it's like William Lane Craig, he derives this particular view because he's convinced of the findings that are published in a particular book called Nature, Red Tooth and Claw, and also for anybody.
Murray's book, right? Is it Murray? That's
I don't know who the author is, but I do happen to know that Daniel Dennett is convinced of this position, that only humans and higher forms of apes can actually experience what he would call deep pain, like the actual reflective nature of pain.
Yeah, more. I think the way I think I read some of Nature, Tooth and Claw. What I remember is that they distinguish morally significant pain and like pain simpliciter or something like that.
They did, but it's like, does the individual actually know that it is in pain? Was the main takeaway that Craig had for it.
Yeah, I think he's inspired by that. The book that you cited of that author is inspired by Lewis to some extent.
Possibly.
C.S. Lewis, right? Because Lewis was kind of disturbed by the whole.
Well, it was written by, I think, a zoologist, and he had conducted a number of studies on animals, and there was pain responses, but I could be mistaken. Like as long as someone is not inspired by Rene Descartes on whether or not animals feel pain, I'm fine. So, oh yeah, you know that story, don't you?
Well, they're based the automaton.
That he dissected dogs without general.
Oh, I don't know that. I didn't know that story.
Yeah, he dissected live dogs to prove an argument of his. I can't remember what argument it was. Oh fuck! It was the trademark argument. That's what it was. The trademark argument for the existence of God. He decided to prove that dogs and other animals couldn't actually feel pain, because that was one of the objections that people raised, was that it's clear that these things can experience pain. So he dissected dogs while they were alive without any painkillers or anesthetics or anything to try and prove that they couldn't feel pain.
Oh man.
Boy, that's a bizarre methodology.
Yeah.
I saw a thing on I forget where I saw. I think it was PBS, where a guy, he's like a Georgia Tech. He does MRIs on dogs, and like it was fascinating because like you got to get the dog to sit still. So they're so there was it's kind of like a loaded data set, because all the dogs have to be like certain kind of dogs that can be trained to sit still. So
or sedated.
Yeah. Well, I guess you can, like what they're trying to do, you can't sedate them because they have to be awake, because they're trying to, because they're
actually trying to map their brain activity.
That correct. They're like showing the dogs things and then looking at their brain activity. They're and I forget what the specific research was. I could find the guy, but
there was one that I was aware of where it was basically they were mapping to tell whether or not dogs dream. And they concluded that they do, and they could tell you what they dream about, which was the events of the day. So if they had an especially troubling day, the dog would be suffering a nightmare, and you could obviously tell whether or not it was. Like, dogs are really weird in that respect, because like they did a number of studies on dogs where it's like, how do they recognize different faces? And when it comes to recognizing a different dog, they just kind of look them dead on. They don't really focus anywhere. But when they're looking at a human, their gaze shifts to the left side of your face, and then kind of makes this triangle around your face, which is
just like we do.
It's a similar fashion in which we recognize faces.
Yeah.
And wolves and wolf hybrids do not do this.
If you're interested in the neuroscience around dogs, the guy's name is Gregory Burns. I put the link in the private chat. GregoryBurns.com. He's got a book out. It's called What It's Like to Be a Dog and Other Adventures in Animal Neuroscience. So,
what it's like to be a dog. You can lick people in public without consequence.
There we go.
Fascinating, though.
But you can hump whatever you want in public, and people will just go, "Oh no, don't do that."
I mean, this is kind of off topic, but my, like I was saying, that my significant other works with children, and one of the things that she does is that they use an EEG on babies. So they show the baby, like they're trying to evaluate the baby's temperament and understand brain activity at like kids that are like from like 6 months to 18 months. And they put a little EEG hat on the baby and like measure the brain waves. And one of the things I do is this kind of a side work is I use some machine learning techniques to explore the because there's different signals like on the locations of the head that reference different parts of the brain, and you can do like image analysis or signal processing on that data to understand the relationships of those in the context over time of like what questions they're asking them. So again, I'm not like, you guys talk a lot about evolutionary biology, but my interest is a lot on the intersections of data science with that kind of stuff. Like, how can we use like algorithmic techniques to understand that large amounts of data that we can collect through things like EEG, or it's a kind of quasi bioinformatic type of stuff. So I'm sure Speed has some like experience, or I know he's done some bioinformatics work in that respect. So whatever, I find that area interesting.
Yep, except I'm half asleep right now. So.
No, I got to get out of here anyways. I got to go do some family stuff. But it was really great talking to everybody.
Yep, good to have you.
Thanks.
Nice.
See you later.
We'll see you, Jason.
See you, Dressel. Dessel, I should say.
I'm gonna have to do something.
Something.
Shoot her in the head. Maybe go over to Dapper Dino's channel and see what's happening there with the Titanic, if it's sunk or not, or I don't know. What do you guys want to do?
I'm going to bed.
It sounds like everybody's going to bed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shoot it.
All right.
Okay, we're going to shoot it in the head.
All right.
Good enough. Thanks, guys, for showing up tonight.
Yep.
Night.
Always good. Nicola, you don't come in enough. Nicola or whatever the fuck. How the fuck do you say that, Nicola? I can never say that. Why can't I say that? Oh, fuck it all. Where's my thing? Okay, we're quitting. Wow.
I noticed Peter wasn't here this night.